Picture this. You're a Royal Australian Air Force air surveillance operator monitoring the airspace around RAAF base Tindal, about 270 kilometres south of Darwin. Everyone is tense. This morning the Chinese Communist Party announced that reunification was imminent, and it was sick of waiting for the separatist government in Taipei to come to its senses. The People's Liberation Army Navy, already at sea for a supposed fleet exercise, completed the encirclement of Taiwan, as the People's Liberation Army Rocket Force and Air Force began the most savage bombardment the world has seen since the end of World War II. The Australian government swiftly condemned the bombardment alongside the US, Japan and South Korea, drawing critique from the Chinese embassy in Australia, demanding the Prime Minister not act as a mindless puppet of the US imperialists and instead make the wise decision of staying out of Chinese domestic affairs. It is now midnight. Tindal over the horizon radar has already passed along several warnings related to Chinese air activity north of Indonesia, but nothing showing outright hostile intent. You feel confident? After all, this invasion didn't come out of the blue, and assets have been reassigned accordingly. An E-7 Alpha is orbiting overhead, the nearby LACM battery is up, and 75 squadrons F-35s are alert 30, just in case. Suddenly, the screen in front of you lights up as reports flood in from the E-7. Link 16 tracks coloured bright red for hostile begin populating the edge of the screen. You begin counting to make your own report, but after 60 you just shrug and call 12 groups, guerrilla. The Intello IDs them as CJ-20s, launched from the other side of Indonesia by PLAF H-6 Badger bombers. The missiles RCS too small for John to pick up. You have time. The missiles are subsonic, and the E-7 has picked them up far enough out that they are still over an hour away. But there are too many for the scrambled F-35s to intercept with their limited payload. The LACM battery might intercept a dozen if they are lucky, but that still leaves too many leakers. All you can do is wait and watch. This right here is the nightmare scenario for every defence planner in Australia. A preemptive land attack cruise missile or LACM strike on RAAF bases Tindal and Darwin, prior to Australia formally entering the conflict. Now you probably have a few questions. Firstly, why would China risk drawing Australia into war just to destroy Darwin? Secondly, how are they most likely to do it? And thirdly, what can Australia do now or in the future to deter just such a preemptive strike? So why Darwin? Darwin is Australia's northern gateway and one of the most strategically important areas in the region. It hosts RAAF Base Darwin, RAAF Base Tindal, large fuel logistics hubs, pre-existing US Marine and United States Air Force infrastructure, and critical air and maritime surveillance infrastructure. If you're the Chinese Central Military Commission, hitting Darwin achieves three strategic effects. 1. You delay Australian air operations. Destroying or damaging runways, fuel storage and aircraft shelters can slow the RAAF's ability to generate sorties, forcing RAAF fighters, tankers and special mission aircraft to fly interception and combat air patrol missions out of RAAF Base Hamberley, RAAF Base Pearce, or even just civilian airfields, leaving not only land-based infrastructure vulnerable, but also Australian Navy assets already at sea when the conflict began. Number 2. You influence Australian political decision making. A preemptive strike is meant to shock, intimidate, and pressure Australia to stay out of a Taiwan conflict. The goal isn't necessarily to defeat Australia militarily, but to cripple its political will. You tell Australian politicians straight out of the gate, we can touch you, you can't touch us, and the US doesn't have the resources to protect you right now. Number 3. You undermine US alliance operations. Darwin is a key staging point and logistics hub for the US and Australian militaries. Damaging it complicates American planning and reduces available bases for bombers, tankers, fighters, and naval ships. So, how would China carry out a strike? China has several strike options available, each offering different advantages and disadvantages. Number 1. Air-launched cruise missiles. The H-6 Kilo and H-6 November bombers can each carry 6 CJ-20 LACMs, with ranges exceeding 2,000 kilometers according to the US Army's OSINT Odin database. This combined with the H-6's 6,000 kilometer operational range under full combat load easily allows weapon release north of Indonesia, well outside US or Australian ability to intercept prior to weapons release. The missile's relatively slow subsonic speed does give Australian forces the ability to intercept once detected, but as depicted in the introduction, Indigenous Australian ability to destroy swarms of missiles is extremely lacking, unless given ample time to prepare. Number 2. Submarine-launched missiles. The People's Liberation Army Navy, gonna call them the Plan from now on, nuclear submarines operating in the Timor-Arafura Sea could launch cruise or ballistic missiles directly at northern Australia. This gives Australian forces very little time to react, but leaves the submarines incredibly vulnerable to RAN warships, USN warships, RAAF or USN P-8s, or even other US nuclear submarines. A launch from outside these ranges does offer more safety for the submarine, but without the raw numbers to saturate Darwin's integrated air missile defense. For example, a single Jin-class nuclear submarine only possesses 12 launch tubes. Number 3. Mainland launched ballistic missiles. The PLAF DF-31 intermediate range ballistic missile does have the range to hit Darwin directly from China. They'll be extremely fast and impossible to intercept with Australia's current arsenal, but will most likely be reserved for more important US-owned targets. Number 4. Strike facilitators. If the wars in Ukraine and Gaza have taught us anything, it's that no strike is committed in a vacuum and not to underestimate the power of strike facilitators. For example, decoy drones from embedded intelligence assets, cyber operations, and insider threats from compromised personnel. So what would China target? China would not need to destroy the bases permanently, only disrupt them long enough to achieve their initial war aims. Likely targets include runways and taxiways, fuel storage and pipelines, grounded aircraft, command and control nodes, radar and sensor networks, logistics infrastructure. Cratering runways alone can halt flying operations for hours or even days, forcing any surviving aircraft to be trucked to extant but unmanned and undersupplied rural air bases, buying China time in the opening phases of the conflict. So, what can Australia do about it? Now we reach the heart of the issue: how to deter such a strike from occurring. The ADF can do this in two ways: passive and active deterrence. By passive deterrence, I mean things like hardened shelters, disperse/decoy assets, secondary/tertiary facilities, and well-drilled runway repair teams. Active deterrence is your IAMD network, your ground-based systems and airborne interceptors. Hardening and dispersal. Australia has already begun investing in hardened aircraft shelters. Additional dispersal areas and improvements at bare bases such as Sherga, Curtin and Learmonth. Key needs include more hardened shelters, decoy assets, logistics and C2 redundancy, effective base security including counter-UAS weaponry, demonstrated rapid runway repair capability, and greater dispersal of assets across the north. Also key, modernising air defences or forward stationing US assets. Australia's sensor network is currently some of the best in the world. Jindalee Over the Horizon Network or JORN, E7 Alpha Wedgetail, MQ4 Charlie Triton, and Spy-1 Delta allow unparalleled detection capability of any force with hostile intent to our north, but we severely lack any means to deal with the strike once detected. No Australian capability is capable of exo-atmospheric interception of ballistic missiles, and our only endo-atmospheric interceptor, the SM-6, is based on the Hobart-class destroyers, currently based out of Sydney. Even if the Australian government ordered one of the 3 Hobart-class vessels to station themselves off of Darwin in the ballistic missile defence role, that is a 4,200 kilometre trip. Our only current ground-based air defence is the LACM air defence system, with local COPS phased array radars. An excellent short-range system, but its current effector, the AIM-120, doesn't have the kinematic profile to handle ballistic missiles, hypersonic cruise missiles, or have the magazine depth for maxed subsonic cruise missile salvos. Essentially, this leaves the Australian government with 4 options. Number 1. Rely on the US government deciding Darwin is important enough to warrant permanent pre-deployment of its precious Patriot and THAAD batteries here instead of Japan, South Korea, Guam, or the Philippines. Or purchase these or similar systems from the US or Europe and hope they arrive and reach initial operational capability before any conflict breaks out. Or permanently station a Hobart class off the port of Darwin. Or hope you have enough heads up that you can order the deployment prior to any strike being conducted. No great options, whichever way you slice it. So, how likely is this scenario? A deliberate preemptive strike on Darwin is possible, but certainly not China's preferred option. It introduces significant uncertainties. the risk of escalation to full regional war. Not ideal if China is framing the invasion of Taiwan as an internal issue, making US diplomacy easier. Any strike on Darwin would almost certainly bring previously neutral countries under the US umbrella. Global political blowback. Attacking a neutral third party whilst already engaged in a conflict is usually not a 1000 IQ play. Just ask Japan and Germany how that worked out for them in World War II. For China to consider it worthwhile, Australian involvement in Taiwan would need to be judged both imminent and decisive. The scenario is not probable, but it is plausible, and exposes significant capability gaps in the ADF, which is why defence planners take it so seriously. In conclusion, a missile strike on Northern Australia is one of the most concerning military scenarios for the ADF. It is unlikely, but far from impossible. Darwin and Tindal are critical pieces of Australia and the US's strategic architecture, making them natural targets in any high-end peer-v-peer conflict. For Australia to successfully deter China, the following courses of action are needed: more hardened and dispersed infrastructure, better air defence defectors like SM-3 and THAAD, and close allied coordination and potential forward deployment. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to leave a like and subscribe.